Hey, welcome to week 2, Nonprofit 302 and Leadership. This week we're going to be focusing on chapters 4 and 5, and we're going to start by getting right into some leadership models and take a look at characteristics of these types of leadership models and strengths and weaknesses of them. But before I did that, I wanted to point out to you that there are a number of organizations designed specifically to help nonprofit leaders. And one behind me, that fellow right there scratching his forehead, this is the Nonprofit Leadership Alliance. There's some incredible resources and tools on this site to help you find your own leadership style, give you some ideas of leadership development, and also job resources if you're interested in work in the nonprofit area. But anyway, let's kind of get into this. Chapters 4 and 5, this is in part 2. The focus now is on the leader. Part 1 was on nonprofit organizations and the challenges, and the second part of the book is dealing specifically with the leader. And in chapter 4, we're looking at leadership, mission leadership, and in chapter 5 we'll look at transformational leadership. There are a number of different leadership styles, and we're just going to wrestle with these two this week. At first is missionary leadership, and missionary leaders focus exclusively on the mission of the organization. All the decisions that they make, the planning activities in which they engage are based on the organization's mission, its vision, and how those decisions and activities impact the mission. So in the chapter, you'll read about the concept of mission, what a mission for an organization is, while it's important, why it's kind of the defining characteristics of, it answers the question, what is this organization about? What does it do? What's its job one? And then looking at the relationship between the mission and leadership and how they're closely aligned and tied together in the missionary leadership model. And you'll also explore the importance of this leadership team, how a missionary leader aligns him or herself with other like-minded individuals that are focused, again, exclusively on the organization's mission, and how that comes together. And there's also a little bit of exploration, definition on the role of the leader in directing and sustaining motivation. One of the things that leaders have to do is to motivate those around them, whether they're motivating the volunteers, whether they're motivating their staff, whether they're motivating the board, or whether they're motivating just the general population or people that they're interacting with. One of the roles of nonprofit organizations is advocacy, and that is working on behalf of a cause or an organization and attempting to educate, influence, and persuade people to act in a certain way, to introduce legislation, to change legislation, or something simple as giving to the organization. So in chapter 4, you'll look at this. The first one you're encountering is missionary leadership, and get an idea of what it is, kind of what it looks like and its strengths. And then in chapter 5, we're going to shift gears entirely and look at transformational leadership. Transformational leaders are completely different than missionary leaders. And in chapter 5, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about transformational leadership theory. For every model of leadership, there's a corresponding theory associated with it. And what does that mean to you? That means that a bunch of academics like myself devote a lot of their professional livelihood and work to focusing and writing and making presentations based on a certain type of leadership model. And of course, transformational leadership is no different. But transformational leadership is different than missionary leadership in that transformational leaders work very closely with others around them to transform the organization. And how do you transform an organization? You transform an organization by transforming the people around you. Inspiring vision, inspiring creativity, inspiring commitment and motivation. Transformational leadership and transformational leaders work to change others around them by motivating them, by the proverbial getting everybody on the same page, empowerment, engendering trust and commitment and compassion and passion for the organization. I don't know how many of you have spent any time in a history class or studying the leadership of one of our former presidents, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, but he was regarded as like the model for a transformational leader. Very extroverted, very outgoing person, very open to experience, a risk taker, and trusting people, empowering them to make decisions, but also motivating them and transforming them to become the very best they can be. Transformational leaders spend a lot of time investing in the people that are around them. They're great role models. Other examples of great transformational leaders, one that you can probably relate to is Nelson Mandela. Someone that you probably have studied, you have seen firsthand his leadership, the output of it, the fact that he inspired people to greatness when he became the president of South Africa, and his ability to bring people together, to get everybody on the same page, and to say to them, this isn't my vision of Africa, we need to develop our vision of Africa, and we need to get everybody kind of on the same page, and together create a vision, and to pursue that vision with excellence. And that's what transformational leaders do. I'm not going to sit here and pontificate and tell you there's a very best model for leadership. There are many models. They all have their strengths. They all have their weaknesses. Good leaders use characteristics and skill set from a number of different leadership models and a number of different leadership situations, and we'll explore that going through some other chapters when we're looking at some other leadership models. But let's first venture into what a leadership model looks like. We're just looking at missionary leadership. We're looking at transformational leadership and the characteristics and qualities therein. You'll have a reading journal this week. I also want you to be mindful you've got quizzes kind of coming up. Let me say one quick thing about quizzes. All of the quizzes for this class are open-ended. I'm not going to give you a multiple guess or yes, no, or fill in the blank. They're going to ask you a series of questions, 5. They'll be open-ended questions. That means you'll write an essay. These questions will come directly from the material you've read in the book. I'm not going to dig real deep in the textbook and find some arcane thing that you likely glanced over. I call it meat and potatoes. I'm going to ask you the obvious important questions out of the reading. And in your response, I'm looking for depth and breadth. Again, as you've been doing your reading journal, you started one last week. I want you to think in terms of depth and breadth. A response to a quiz question ought to be at least a full paragraph and probably more. A sentence or two doesn't cut it. When I ask you to describe, I want you to describe. And I'm not trying to be difficult, but describe doesn't mean list. I need to be able to determine whether you're learning the material, whether you know it or not. And the only way I can do that is look at your reading journals and looking at your quiz and, of course, the paper later in the course. I guess the maxim for quiz response is more is better, but I'm looking for content. I call it fluff versus stuff. Don't pontificate. Just give me the facts, but I want you to do so in a way that's thoughtful and reflective, because I want to see that you're thinking about these things in your responses. If you've got any questions about that, by all means, reach out to me and I'll help you. I hope you're kind of getting used to the pace of the course. As I mentioned, as an abbreviated course, going over 7.5 weeks as opposed to 15. Things move really quickly. They have to by necessity because we got a lot of material to cover. And I know you can do it. It's an adjustment, but that's what good leaders do, right? Leaders adjust, and they adjust to the circumstances and the situations, and they do the very best they can. So, week 2, go at it. If you got any questions, let me know, and I'll come to you virtually next week.